इवनिंग MOS members. सबसे पहले तो मैं नमस्कार करूंगी because that is the way to go in these COVID times. All of us should be saying namaskar only and not touching each other, because you all know that we are going through very tough times and all of us need to take a lot of care, not only of ourselves but of those around us as well. So keeping that in mind, because we are not physically able to hold CME seminars and so on. So we thought, in association with NTOT, that this would be the best way of staying in touch with academics by means of these webinars. I can assure you that we are going to continue these webinars. There will be 2 webinars every month. So a lot of people are going to get chances of presenting on these webinars. I would welcome the suggestions of all our members. You can email me, you can send it on my personal WhatsApp, or to Vardhaman, or to Preetam Samant, our Chairman Scientific Committee. We will try to include all the subjects that you wish to hear about and the speakers that you wish to hear from. And I would like maximum number of members to utilize this facility which has been accorded to us in these difficult times. And we are also trying to make this MMC credit point wise available to us. We are going to be approaching the MMC. Since this is the first webinar, we could not do it for this one, but in future we are definitely going to try and see if we can get MMC points also for these webinars. So with that, I hand you over to you will be able to see a small video by Mr. Kishore Masurekar. He is the MD of NTOT Pharma and he has something nice to tell us.
नमस्कार. मी तुम्हा सर्वांचे स्वागत करत आहे. कोविड-19मुळे जगामध्ये एवढा फरक पडेल याचा अंदाज कोणालाही नव्हता. पण जेव्हा आपण इतिहासाकडे बघतो, म्हणजे प्लेग, एड्स यासारखे रोग जेव्हा आपल्या पृथ्वी तलावर आले, त्यावेळेला आपल्या मेडिकल सायन्सने त्यांच्यावर मात केली. आणि आत्तासुद्धा कोविड-19वर आपलं मेडिकल सायन्स लवकरात लवकर मात करेल याबद्दल मला पूर्ण खात्री आहे. आमची कंपनी एनटॉट फार्मास्युटिकल लिमिटेड गेल्या 40 वर्षापासून ऑप्थॅल्मिक मेडिकल सायन्सवर च्या प्रचारासाठी किंवा प्रसारासाठी फार जास्त भर देत आहे. आणि यामुळेच भारतातीलच नव्हे तर जगातल्या सर्व ऑप्थॅल्मिक संघटनेशी संलग्न होऊन आम्ही आत्तापर्यंत कित्येक सेमिनार्स, कॉन्फरन्सेस, वेबिनार, स्टुडंट एज्युकेशन प्रोग्राम असे आयोजित केलेले आहेत आणि याप्रमाणे ते करत पण राहणार आहोत. आता आम्ही याच कामासाठी आणि या कामाला वेग येण्यासाठी आम्ही एक ट्रस्ट फॉर्म केलेला आहे आणि त्याचं नाव आहे नेत्रज्ञान ट्रस्ट. या ट्रस्टच्या खाली आम्ही अजून जास्त ऑप्थॅल्मिक ज्ञान आणि सायन्स हे वाढवण्याच्या उद्देशाने आम्हाला जे काही करता येईल ते आम्ही त्या ट्रस्टद्वारे करायचा आमची इच्छा आहे. या कार्यामध्ये मला तुमच्या सगळ्यांचा सहयोग पाहिजे आहे आणि यासाठीच मी पुन्हा तुम्हाला भेटणार पण आहे. मी पुन्हा एकदा तुमचे आभार मानतो. नमस्कार.
I would now like to request our Chairman Scientific Committee, Dr. Preetam Samant, to introduce our eminent guest for today, Dr. Ramesh Kekunia, who is a pediatric ophthalmologist and a wonderful speaker in his own right. More importantly, he's a very good human being, which I think is the most wonderful quality he has. Preetam, over to you.
Sir, unmute. Thank you, madam. I've been given the mute. The pleasant job of introducing Dr. Ramesh. First of all, let me tell you that in today's times, unprecedented times, we cannot stop our academics. The show must go on, and in keeping with the mantra of social distancing, we have started these webinars. We know that our president and her forte is pediatric ophthalmology, so we chose pediatric ophthalmology first. And Dr. Ramesh is going to speak on guidelines for prescription glasses in children and myopia control. I think Dr. Ramesh really doesn't need an introduction because has an international presence. But nevertheless, I should tell you that Dr. Ramesh is a head of pediatric ophthalmology, stenosis and neuro-ophthalmology at the Apex Institute of our country, LV Prasad Eye Institute, Hyderabad. He has various international and national, he has presented at various international and national meetings. He has received achievement awards and international scholar awards from the prestigious American Academy of Ophthalmology, from the American Academy of Pediatricians and Strabismologists. He has authored more than 100 peer-reviewed publications in various prestigious journals like the BJO, AJO, IJO, and the list goes on. So I hand over the mic to you, Dr. Ramesh, and we are looking forward to a wonderful evening of academics. Dr. Ramesh.
Thank you so much, Dr. Preetham. I'll just share my slide. Okay, I hope I'm audible. Thank you very much, the Maharashtra Ophthalmological Society for this opportunity. Particularly, thank you very much to Dr. Sunayana Malik, Dr. Vardhaman, Dr. Preetham, and additionally, thank you very much, Dr. Hemalini Samant and Dr. Abba Khanade, who will be the panelists today. And what a better way to start this webinar. We always say that kids always first. So kids always take priority over anything else. So today what the organizing committee has chosen is the topic of spectacle prescription in children and myopia control. All of you know that the refractive error is the most common cause of visual impairment in children. And let's all learn together. We have a didactic lecture followed by panel discussion. And obviously, all of you can ask many questions on this. Let's see how we can give better vision for these children. So, most important thing, I've written 3 times there, refraction, refraction, refraction. Without that, we can't even think of giving glasses for children. Whoever amongst us who are treating these children, we should be good in refraction. Sometimes you have to do refraction in this extreme condition because depending upon the age and corporation, we'll have to modify our clinics and things like that. And obviously, this is one thing we cannot do on teleophthalmology. Hopefully, something will come up in the future. I put the dilating drops as a cycloplegic drops as cyclopentolate, Homide, and atropine in that order, because still the cyclopentolate is the most commonly used cycloplegic eye drop. Homide we use in some of the conditions where the children have seizures. And atropine is sometimes we use it, especially in non-dilating and heavily pigmented, and some of the cases of infantile, the accommodative isotropias. So today's objective is threefold. First one, let's just understand the broader outline or a guideline for treatment of or prescription of myopia, hypermetropia, and astigmatism correction. I will share 7 to 8 clinical scenarios with all of you so that always with clinical scenario, we learn better. And obviously there is a segment for discussion, a short discussion on how do we control myopia progression. And fourth one I've not added here. our panelists, Dr. Hemalini as well as Dr. Abha Kannade, can begin the panel discussion as well as question and answer session. Why do you want to prescribe glasses in children? It's not as straightforward as just the presence of refractive error. You have to consider visual demands. For example, if you are treating a child of say 7 or 8 months, the child has -2 myopia. The visual demand is not so much for that child. We probably don't have to correct at that stage. I'm not saying -2 is not important, but that visual demand of that baby is not so much at that point of time. Second one is the accommodative ability. You know, most of the Down syndrome and developmental delay patients or CVI patients, they have a disturbance in the accommodation ability. Sometimes it depends upon previous treatment or adaptability of the child. So it's always the individual experience what we have to really consider. Just let me get rid of this thing. Yeah. So individual experience is very important. There are two sets. One is hypermetropia, one is myopia. Let's go on to the myopia. Most of the times, if you understand the visual demand and the presence of refractive error, the correction is straightforward. Main goal is to improve the visual acuity. Hence, full correction is the way to go. In terms of hypermetropia, it's very important to understand the visual acuity. Sometimes we'll be treating just for symptoms of asthenopia, improving binocular functions, especially in accommodative isotropias, and preventing obviously amblyopia, because hypermetropia is known to cause more amblyopia than myopia. In this case, we are always looking at partial correction, sometimes no correction. Sometimes when there is esotropia, we are talking about full correction. This is an important slide for all of you to understand. The red line is at 0. As we go on the negative side, most of us are comfortable in giving glasses once the child starts walking. Because once the child starts walking, the child needs the distance vision where the wall is there and things like that. It's pretty much easy and comfortable. Give the full correction, be it -1, -2, -9 or -10. Even some of the ROP children or some kind of syndromic children can have high myopia even at 1 year. So it's easy and comfortable. The problem is pre-toddlers and preschoolers is the gray zone, especially when they have +1, +2, +3, +4, when they do not have esotropia. This is where sometimes we need to fine-tune our corrections. So every prescription has to be individualized, unlike adults, and threshold for correcting anisometropia is much, much higher. And if you can assimilate for the first objective of guidelines for correction, I would say this is the most important slide. Let's go to the second one because it's easy. In myopia, always give full correction, but never overcorrect. There are some schools of thought that we need to overcorrect, undercorrect them so that they won't go into the full myopia. That's not true. The evidence is that correct them fully. Second is the hypermetropia. They may not require full correction. Usually reduce equally in both eyes without compromising on visual acuity. I will come to the specific case scenario in hypermetropia in the clinical scenario. When it comes to astigmatism, if it is associated with sphere, give full correction. Again, I'll come to 1 or 2 scenarios. If only cylinder, correct the cylinder if it is more than 1.5. We are talking about specifically less than 3 years and things like that. If a child comes with 7 or 8 years, even 0.5, 0.75 becomes very important, because there we can do a subjective as well as objective refraction. It's possible. 0.75 does not cause too much of a meridional amblyopia. And also, as always, an ophthalmologist you should remember to rule out subclinical keratoconus. It can happen even in children. You need to have monitoring. You need to be monitoring for this always whenever there is a astigmatism. All of you know that children are usually hypermetropic and they do have some astigmatism. In our clinic, in my experience, other panelists can really share their experience. The most common refractive error for a routine checkup when the child comes, what we see is astigmatism. This is what my experience has been when they come for we just came for a routine checkup and they land up with going with -2.5 or -2 or -1.75. And most of this hypermetropia resolves by 3 years by the process called e-metropization. And always there is more myopia in prematures, especially lenticular myopia in retinopathy of prematurity. So more they are premature, they have known to have refractive error, specifically myopia and astigmatism. Coming to the hypermetropia, 6% of 6 to 8-month-old infants are hyperopia of +3.5. They do have 13 times more risk of strabismus and 6 times more risk of amblyopia. Even at 9 months or 10 months, if you see a esotropia, everyone will do a cycloplegic refraction, get the maximum sphere, that is hypermetropia, give the full correction. Presence of esotropia warrants full correction. The confusion in hypermetropia comes only if the patient is orthotropic or exotropic, where we have to undercorrect. So by the age of 4 years, this impacts our prescription decisions. For example, look at these siblings. They came at this age. If you look at them, one of them is 7 years, the other one is 5 years old. They came with not able to look at the blackboard and not able to write properly. These children have bilateral symmetrical hypermetropia. They have gone into ametropic amblyopia. And we have given glasses. Both of them have +6. So we have given +4.75, with which their vision is slowly improving. As opposed to this, the older guy came first. He got these glasses. He has esotropia. With the glasses, his esotropia is corrected. The next visit, he is bringing his younger sibling. You can see a definite there is a esotropia there. We have to give full correction. There is no question. Just do cycloplegic refraction, give the full correction. That's about it. And why I'm showing this picture is, whenever you see a hypermetropia in a family, your threshold for prescription becomes very low. All three of them, all the three siblings have something called refractive accommodative esotropia. This is very important, including his father has a hypermetropia. You can see that there is hypermetropia. So in the presence of esotropia, general prescription principle is give full correction of full hyperopic correction in accommodative esotropia. The second picture, you can see there is a bifocal segment, because when they have high EC/A ratio, you can give a +3 additional glasses. It can be usually executive bifocals bisecting the pupil, but there is more and more evidence that even a D bifocal can be possible. Exotropia, the correction of myopia and astigmatism is always full. When it comes to correction of hyperopia, there is some kind of debate whether to completely give that hypermetropia or undercorrect. Generally, little bit of undercorrection is required. And in some cases of intermittent exotropia, we can even give over minus glasses. There are some special situations which we all come across. We do cataract surgery in children. Either they are aphakic or pseudophakic. We give single vision glasses till they start walking or looking at the iPad or some kind of drawing. Sometimes children start at 2.5 years or 3 years. So then you can give a +3 or +1 addition depending upon the age. And you can see after doing that surgery, That pair of FA kick glasses, most of our children cannot afford contact lenses. It makes a significant change in that child's visual behavior as well as that child. You can see the child's life is much, much better with the presence of glasses. Just one slide about some of the special situations which we may not consider sometimes. Lack of accommodation, developmental delay, they usually have, even Down syndrome patients will have accommodative insufficiency. It's best to give +2 or +3 to improve their focusing power. And whenever there is an accommodative spasm, there will be a pseudomyopia. And in subluxated lenses, sometimes we examine the child is highly myopic, but there is a aphakic segment. For that, we might have to give sometimes the bifocals or plus additional. Through that area, they will not be able to see, especially when there is a superior or superiotemporal subluxation. This is important, we need to give. And as discussed earlier, ROP kids can have myopia. Even after laser, they can have this. So you need to consider prescribing in this kind of scenario. Last segment, that is astigmatism. Bilateral meridional amblyopia, astigmatism up to 1.5 in a very small kid is not amblyogenic. Whenever you have an oblique astigmatism, they are more amblyogenic. This is important when you assess. Astigmatism in different axes, as you all know, is more amblyogenic. And in unilateral cases, give full correction, and also look for any hemangioma or other things, or ptosis, where you can see more of a unilateral astigmatism, like this. The first case, there is a deprivational amblyopia as well as meridional amblyopia. In the second case, there may not be a deprivational amblyopia. There could be a more of astigmatism will be there in this kind of situation. So anisometropia is a powerful risk factor for developing amblyopia. It causes amblyopia by 3 years. So that's why we need to do our refraction very early and give appropriate glasses. And spectacle compliance in very small children when they have astigmatism, it's not easy. Most of the parents say that the child is throwing the glasses away. Most of the complaint you can hear is they throw their glasses. So they need to have patience. Over a period of time, the child adapts to these glasses. So this, I think I can't make it interactive. I wish I could make it interactive, but I'll give 8 to 9 clinical scenario. This is a 3-year-old boy. Parents complains of diminution of vision in child. 3 months onset. He is orthotropic. Extraocular muscle movement is full. Fundus is within normal limits. This is a visual acuity, poor vision in both eyes for a 3-year-old with Leah symbol. And this is the refractive error. Our guideline says this is a moderate myopia. It's a compound myopic astigmatism. Here, there is no question. 3 years, he needs to see distance objects. He may be crossing the road sometimes. He needs to watch TV from distance. Nowadays, kids go to school at 3 years. We need to give full correction in this kind of scenario. -4, -1.5, -5.5, and -1.5. The question asked here is, do we need to patch at this point of time? No need to patch. There is a mild anisometropia. It corrects by itself in most of the kids. Case number 2. 5-year-old, orthotropic, extraocular muscle movements are full. Vision is uncorrected is 20/80. +4.5 with cylinder, +5 with cylinder. So here, most important factor is he is not esotropic. So in this scenario, we have learned that we are going to undercorrect for this patient. How much is to undercorrect? I would say cut off +1.5 on both sides and give full cylinder on both sides. People can do cut off +2, +1.5. There could be some kind of variability. That's why we are talking about guidelines here. It's not that 2 ophthalmologists will give a different prescription in this scenario. 4-year-old boy, chief complaint is squint. 30 prisms of esotropia for near distance and near. Vision is poor in both eyes for 4-year-old. Here +7, and the second one should be +5.5 with cylinder. Here there is no question, give full correction. This is a full correction here because of the presence of esotropia here. Case number 4, inward deviation since 1.5 years of age, typical of refractive accommodative esotropia. He was wearing glasses for the last 6 months, +3 in the right eye and +4 in the left eye. Without glasses, there is a disparity for near and distance. The disparity of 20 prism diopters persists even for with the glasses. What do you do here? Something is missing here. We have to repeat the cycloplegic refraction. If you find it +3 and +4 again, we have to give a additional bifocal glasses here because there is a residual 20 prism diopters of esotropia for near. We have to give bifocal or executive bifocal in this case. Case number 5, squeezing history of squeezing since 1 year. Whenever a child comes with squeezing, most commonly you can think of 2 situations. One is astigmatism and one is myopia. 20/60 both eyes with Leah symbols, and he has the plus is missing in the upper part. Right eye +1.75 with -4.5, +1.5 with -4 in the left eye. What do you do here? In this case, again, there are 2 approaches. Cylinder wise, we have to give full cylinder. Obviously rule out any kind of subclinical keratoconus, which is unlikely in this case. And some people might add a little bit of sphere, that is 0.75 or 0.5. But most important thing here is to give full cylindrical correction. Case number 6, the child underwent cataract surgery and the child is aphakic, 3 months old, and the refraction is +21 and +21. Here, the child's visual demand is for more for near. So you add +3 to this, either give a contact lens or you can give glasses. So the glass final prescription would be +24 in both eyes. Case number 7, in this case, there is an intraocular lens. The child's age is 5 years, 20/60 in both eyes, not bad. Probably it's a case of developmental cataract. We would have undercorrected. That's why you can see a hyperopic refraction of +2.5 with cylinder. In this case, we'll have to give full prescription with bifocal glasses because the child is 5 years. Again, the visual demand for near and distance is different in this case. Case number 8, 4-year-old boy, orthotropic fundus is normal, visual acuity 20/40, and the left eye is poor. There is a myopia. Right eye is hypermetropia with astigmatism. Left eye is compound myopic astigmatism with high myopia. Here, still I would give a cylindrical power in the right eye because 20/40 is there, and also -2 is significant. We will give a full correction in the left eye. At the first visit, we can only give glasses. If the amblyopia persists, we can give patching at the subsequent visit. The last scenario, 8-year-old girl complains of difficulty in seeing since 1 year. Vision is 20/60, orthotropic. For near, small exophoria is there. In this case, there is a hypermetropia with astigmatism. Since she is 9 years old, you can do something called post-mydriatic test. You can, or cycloacceptance, you can check and give the appropriate glasses. And definitely not a full correction of hypermetropia in this situation. So, but once you do the cycloplegic refraction, the hypermetropia goes up to +6.5 and +5.5 in this particular case. What you can do is, you can come in between somewhere and check the acceptance or call for a post-mydriatic test. Here, definitely, child will be taking whatever dry refraction most often, but sometimes they can take a little bit more than the dry refraction here. So in this older children, when you are doing a refraction or a pre-dilated examination, I would always go for acceptance at this stage only. Otherwise, you'll have to call the child for another visit. So post-mydriatic test, you have to remember. And in high hypermetropia, when you give correction for the first time, you will have to give Homide eye drops for a week or two to paralyze their accommodation, and adaptability becomes better. So cycloacceptance is a useful tool. Judicious use is required, especially in astigmatism, myopia, and compound myopic astigmatism. Hyperopia is best avoided. And prefer PMT wherever possible. If not possible, sometimes we all get patients from different places. So you can base your decision based on principle discussed above. So spectacle prescription is an art. Depends upon child's refractive error, visual acuity within the global evaluation of the child. That's very, very important. The global evaluation is very, very important. I will take 5 more minutes for the last part. We can discuss some of these things if not covered here. How do you control myopia progression? And as you all know, if you look at the near work theory for myopia, there is an accommodative lag theory and a mechanical tension theory. Both are different. Both, if you look at the flow chart here, there is an increase in the axial length, which leads to myopic progression. So at somewhere, can we stop this? Scientists have worked for almost more than 50 years on this particular issue, trying to come, there are a lot of literature. I'm just presenting a World Society of Pediatric Ophthalmology and Strabismus Myopia consensus statement, where it summarizes 4 things. That's what we need to know. What does not work? This is very important before we counsel the parents. What probably does not work? What might work and what does work? The last 2 are more important for us, for our knowledge. What does not work is undercorrection. As I already told, if you get a myopia patient, please do not undercorrect them, give full correction. What probably does not work is bifocals and progressive glasses, and in most of the cases, contact lenses. There is more and more evidence to say that ortho-K lenses work and peripheral retinal defocus lens work. Many companies bring up this lenses. It's available most of the places. And what does work, we know from the literature, is the low dose atropine. And what is the cheapest one is the last one. What you can see here is increasing the daylight exposure, reducing intense period of near work, which is possible, but sometimes that's the easiest thing is most difficult to do, especially with the children glued onto their gadgets. So atropine 0.01% dose appears to be it offers an appropriate risk-benefit ratio for the child. No clinically significant visual side effect. There are occasional side effects from this as well. It is balanced against a reasonable and clinically significant 50% reduction in myopia, which is significant, I would say. Orthokeratology, overnight lens, appears to slow the elongation, but infective keratitis is a risk. Peripheral defocusing lenses also are useful, but its availability and the cost is a factor. And we need to understand better in terms of physiology of this. Increasing the daylight exposure, especially early morning and mid-afternoon, and reducing intense period of near work, especially on gadgets, are very, very important. This is the statement which is available free to give it to your patients, or if you need it, you can download. And for the parents' education, this is very easy. I can send a PDF copy to all of you if you need. It's possible. And how does atropine works? It has a local retinal effect. It changes the biochemical chemically by binding the muscarinic receptors. When you use 1% pupillary dilatation, there is increased UVA exposure and it limits the axial length. And chronic inflammation in the eye is downregulated by atropine. This is the most important study. There are many, many studies. I will not go into the details. Just as a brief, how much you should know about ATOM study 1 and 2 by the Singapore group. Dr. Audrey Chia has come up with this seminal paper a few years ago. You can see the 1% versus placebo, 0.5% versus 1%, and 0.01%. What is very significant here is 0.01% halts the progression after 2 years. And in green, you can see the next column. After 1 year of washout, after using 0.01%, see the washout effect is least with the 0.01%. This is one more statement given by it's a meta-analysis published in the Ophthalmology Journal. It says, this is simple. Level 1 evidence supports the use of atropine to prevent myopia progression. And it has got minimal effect on myopic rebound after treatment is discontinued. These are the two things they have come up. They have also come up with the other modality, that is orthokeratology. It is good, but all of us should remember, especially in India, the microbial keratitis after contact lens, where even if it happens in 1 or 2 child, I think it's significantly disturbing. So based on this literature, we are doing in different situations. As an ophthalmologist, we need to know that it's known to be used between 6 to 12 years. For a myopia, more than 1 diopter or to 6 diopters or maybe more. Astigmatism should be less than 1.5. There has to be a documented progression of 0.5 diopters of progression per year. No associated amblyopia or strabismus. No systemic side diseases, no allergy. How do you follow up? 2 weeks, 3 months, 6 months, and then look at the washout period. Every visit, do the axial length and refraction. And this is the take clinic message I would take. Monitor axial length and refraction. Management either with 0.01% ortho K or multifocals. Anti-myopia strategies are different. And you have to take a multifactorial issue in a child. And it has to be case dependent. Somebody has to monitor. Cycloplegic refraction is very important, and the biometry and the eye shape, if you can look at. And there are a lot of public awareness posters are being used. As an ophthalmologist, all of us should encourage this and participate wherever in the school and things like that to disseminate this knowledge to the parents as well as the teachers. And finally, stay safe, stay home, keep social distancing. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
I think it was an excellent lecture. Dr. Sunaina, can I give my comments? Dr. Sunaina?
Yeah, please, go ahead, Nima.
Ramesh, I think it was a very simple and nice lecture. I just have 1 or 2 comments. You mentioned about the cycloplegics that you use. So here, I'm an SM student, and the protocol that was introduced by Dr. Meenakshi in Shankar-Nitralaya was something called as a CTC protocol. So in this protocol, we put 1 drop of cyclo, followed by 1 drop of T+, and then another drop of cyclo. And after that, we perform a cycloplegic refraction about 20 to 30 minutes later. The reason for putting the T+ is to get a good pupillary dilatation. So somebody who's new to retinoscopy, it's fairly easy for them to perform the retinoscopy. My second comment is on astigmatism. you mentioned about astigmatism being the commonest refractive error that you come across in the OPD, and I would agree with that. And some of the things that I do for my astigmatic children is that I definitely perform a topography if I see any child with astigmatism after the age of 4, because they're generally more cooperative to sit on the topography machine. And I always warn the parents about itching and rubbing the eyes, because this can predispose to keratoconus, like you mentioned, subclinical keratoconus. And lastly, I make sure and counsel the parents that please, get a good pair of glasses and make sure that it's done from a reputed, spectacle shop, because centration of glasses in astigmatism is very, very important. So that is another thing that I always tell the astigmatic parents. And a difficulty that I often face is how to convince the parents, the ones who come with astigmatism. Most of the times they are asymptomatic, and on a routine examination, you discover astigmatism. So Dr. Ramesh, how do you convince these parents that yes, your child has a refractive error and needs glasses?
Yeah, this is the most common. I told in my presentation as well. I completely agree with your CTC point. Only thing is we need to make sure that once you put the CTC, we have to do a cycloplegic refraction, and you should see that there is no variability. That's one thing we need to check. And the second thing about the topography in cooperative children, I think it's extremely important. The third thing, and the question what you're asking is astigmatism. How do you, like 2 years or 2.5 years old kid comes to you, either for an NLD block or a ptosis or just a general checkup, and we see a significant refractive error of minus 1.75. What do I do is, I tell them the child is not seeing. Their main discussion point at that point is they can see a small ant on the floor.
Exactly.
That's what they say. That's what they tell you. Because most of the parents, they don't like. They like strabismus surgery or any kind of surgery. Quick fix they like, but they don't like to wear glasses. If they are not convinced, I say that it's not that the child is blind without these glasses. The child might attain 80% of the vision, what the child has potential. That's why the child is supposed to wear glasses. In spite of this statement, if they are not convinced, I make them sit on the slit lamp and I put this minus 1.75 on their eyes with the trial frame or without sometimes. This is what your child is saying. Are you happy with this vision, or do you want the child to see better? This really works in most of the times.
That's a good tip, Dr. Ramesh.
I would like to add one more point. See, as you have said that the parents say that they can see the ants and all these things. So I show them the videos with glasses and without glasses. And then they get convinced that, it can be corrected. And I always explain it to them that squint is a sign. You can take it as a sign. For example, like if the patient has a fever, there are maybe different causes of fever. So in squint cases, there are different causes of squint. The child may be amblyopic, he may be having some refractive errors, or he may be having cataract and all. So I explain it to them and show the video, they get convinced.
I sometimes also, when I see borderline astigmatic errors or even borderline refractions, I kind of monitor the stereopsis. And if it's, if the stereopsis is good, and if the parents, if I find them that they're slightly reluctant to wear the glasses, I kind of say that, okay, let's observe, give you some time to absorb that shock, come back after 3 months, and then we'll go ahead with the prescription. So I kind of prepare them like that. So that's another thing that you could use in your OPD in private practice.
Could I add a word, please, Hema?
Yeah.
Actually, Ramesh, as you were saying that you tell the parents that they need the glasses. The parents might be willing, but the children are not very often. And then they will try to peek over the glasses. And one common question that most parents have, at least in my practice I found, is they will ask me, what kind of glasses should I get for my child? Because, they feel they can afford it. So should I get them the fiber ones? Because if they go to an optician, invariably the optician is going to look out for his profit. So he invariably says, go for the fiber one because the glass one will break. But the fiber ones scratch very easily. What is your take on this?
Yeah. The question is, first is to convince the parent. Second is, how do you convince the child? Convincing child at the first visit, sometimes you can see the elder sibling is wearing, I also want glasses. Many children get disappointed if you don't give the glasses. There are two things I tell. I warn the parents. Number one, to go for a very cheap kind of glasses at the beginning. Second thing is, if the child likes some color, I tend to tell them go for a pink glasses or a blue frame or whatever. I try to involve the child as much as possible. In spite of that, whenever it comes to astigmatism or hyperopia without esotropia, these are the two situations it's difficult. You need to give some kind of adaptable period for the child, maybe 2 to 3 months. Depending upon their visual acuity improvement, they really adopt. The most difficult one is the mild astigmatism. It's difficult to convince both. But most of the times, they get used to it over a period of time. And I also warn the parents, if the patient is a boy, they need 6 to 7 pair per year. If the patient is a girl, they need 3 to 4 per year. This is the normal thing, because whatever said and done, they throw their glasses here and there. So parents have a guilt feeling that if they go for a cheaper one, they are giving less vision to the child. So this we need to correct. Most of the times we need
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. But we have to tell them that that's not the case. I mean, you don't have to be spending unnecessary money.
So what I tell my patients is that I never give them glass. I always ask them to use the CR39 lenses, or if the affording patients, I give them polycarbonate. If they're one-eyed, then I insist on a polycarbonate. And you get these non-breakable frames that are available. They go by the trade name Miraflex. And you have an Indian version also. You can buy the Indian version. You can bend those frames and they don't break. So that is something else. Dr. Ramesh, you want to tell the audience something about atropine adaptation and hypermetropia? Like sometimes if they don't wear the glasses, how you do you give atropine adaptation to your patients?
Yeah, if I do a atropine refraction, I do that. Otherwise, mostly I prescribed hometropine for 2 to 3 weeks along with the glasses. For example, a child comes with maybe child's age is 3.5 to 4 years with +4 or +5 diopters, hypermetropia, we have found. The vision is not so bad, 20/60 or so. Child is not going to wear +4 or +5 if you just give it. So I invariably give them the hometropine. I don't give atropine because the prolonged period of it. I give that once or twice daily for 2 to 3 weeks. And then once that 2 to 3 weeks are gone, the child wears the glasses very comfortably. That's what I tell them.
Dr. Abha, you wanted to talk about the Bruckner's test. You were mentioning that you wanted to.
I just wanted to ask him what is the minimum age at which we should do the refraction, and maybe suppose the child comes for the nasolacrimal duct blockage and he's complaining of watering, and should we do the retinoscopy, at least the flash retinoscopy, or the Bruckner's test to rule out the high refractive errors? So I think that slide is with Sunaina madam. Can you show the slide of Bruckner's test?
Sunaina madam, you're mute.
Oh.
Abha, can you show it from your side, please? Is it possible for you?
To share the screen, if possible. With regards to timing of refraction, I would say as early as possible. Not like a patient comes to ROP screening and you do refraction at that time, probably not required. But when the child comes to an ophthalmologist with NLD block, the child's age will be 3 or 4 months, sometimes 2 months. Sometimes a newborn comes, you advise massage for that patient and you'll be calling the patient back after 4 weeks or 6 weeks. What is most important in this kind of situations is to look at fundus. You'll have to, because the child can have anything else as well. The second important thing is Bruckner's reflex can pick up squint. It can pick up anisometropia. It may not pick up big anisoastigmatism. So it's a good idea to do. And in Allen-Lee block, the orbit is tend to be small. There are many studies, up to 20% of them can have anisometropia. So it's good to do a refraction as early as possible. Not in a tiny baby of less than neonates, especially I wouldn't do it. Otherwise, it's best to do a Bruckner's trace. It's very, very important.
Yeah. Dr. Vardhaman, can you please show that slide? I had sent it to you as well. I don't know whether I will be able to share it from...
We will try, Abha. In the meantime, Ramesh, I just wanted to ask you another question. What would be your choice of dilating drops? Would you prefer to go with Homide or cyclopentolate or atropine?
Yeah, I would say this is many people even now in India prefer atropine. I don't prefer atropine. I prefer cyclopentolate along with, as Dr. Hemalini said, the combination of CTC. That's my first choice. There are some exceptions. If the child has a CVI or some kind of seizure disorders, I would not put cyclopentolate. It can cause seizures, it can precipitate. So I would use Homide in that type. If the pupil is not dilating for some reason, I would use atropine. If the child has refractive accommodative esotropia or partially accommodative esotropia, I use atropine. The situations where I use atropine is very, very minimal, maybe 5 to 10% of our practice. That's my choice. Others can share their views as well.
Ramesh, a very common exam question that postgraduates are always asked, that if you use atropine or Homide or cyclopentolate, apart from the working distance, do you deduct any amount for the drug that you use?
Yeah, obviously we'll have to change it. Maybe 0.5 for cyclo and Homide, and 1 diopter for atropine. That's the correction we do for
I don't personally follow it in my practice. Do you follow it in your practice?
Yeah, when you use atropine, yes. But in a high hypermetropia, the difference of 0.5 is not going to make a difference.
Correct.
When you're statistically looking at 100 children, 0.5 can make a difference, because some patients can have a variation of plus 2.5. Some patient can have a variation of plus 0.75. So generally, probably you can cut around 0.5 or so. Atropine, more likely, I would cut around 1 or 0.75. But
what about the protocol for atropine? Like, what is the dosage that you use? People have different dosages. You prefer ointment? You prefer drop?
I use ointment with obviously explaining everything to the parents for 3 days, and they come back. It becomes extremely difficult in different. The patients belong to different states, but still, in that 10% I said, I will do it with the 3 days of ointment. I would suggest.
Twice a day, once a day.
Once a day, night time before sleeping, they can put the ointment in both eyes 3 days prior to the appointment.
Yeah, and I think the most important instruction at this point is tell the mothers to wash their hands, because if they touch their hands by mistake, I've had parents frantically calling me, "What ointment have you given? I can't see anything in the morning."
Exactly. That's right.
I would like to add one more comment, that I ask them to keep the antipyretic ready at their place.
Yes.
Because if the child develops fever, then it's very easy.
Yeah.
And if they develop allergy, then stop the medicine and they should come immediately. And one more thing I have learned from my experience, that I ask parents not to taste the medicine in their own eyes, because 1 or 2 patients' parents, they have put the atropine in their eyes. कि कितना जलता है, कितना burning होता है. So it is very important to explain it to them.
I think extremely important.
And one more.
Yeah, go ahead, ma'am.
One more point. after giving the high hypermetropic glasses, when the patient is under the effect of the atropine, I ask them to make the glasses as early as possible. Nowadays, we can make the glasses within 1 or 2 days, so there is no problem. And I call them at least 8 days after wearing the glasses, and as early as possible, because what happens, you have to check the glasses whether the glasses are correct or not. Sometimes the patient may not use the glasses, so you have to explain it to them. I had one patient who was given +10 because his refractive error was +12. He came for the first time. He was 4-year-old. So patient was sitting in the OPD. I asked him whether he's wearing the parent said, yeah, he's wearing the glasses. He's very happy and all. But when I checked the glasses, it was given +1 by the optician. So sometimes we may also make mistakes, and the opticians can also make the mistakes. So it is very important to do the first follow-up at the earliest.
So, Dr. Ramesh, I think one of the, we are getting a lot of audience questions. I think we have over almost 400 questions now. I'll ask one of the most commonly asked questions, which is, how long do we give atropine, diluted atropine of 0.01% till we know that it is effective or it is not effective?
Yeah, I think it's at least 3 to 4 cycles we need to give. When I say 3 to 4 cycles, every 3 months, if you call them, at least for 1 year, you will get an idea whether the myopia is progressing or not. Obviously, you'll have to correlate with the axial length and things. So minimum of 1 year it takes to understand whether it's working or not.
Okay. And all right.
I have a question from Ashish Jain from Nasik. And Dr. Ramesh, he wants to know role of screeners like Plus Optics in routine OPD and screening.
In the routine clinical situations, I wouldn't really recommend, but for the school or home screening, probably it's recommended, because in the clinic, you can make use of cycloplegic refraction, either yourself, or you can also do auto refraction at the clinic. I would not rely too much on Plus Optics when you are in the clinic. But as a public program, if you want to do a school screening program and things like that, like we did one of the study on tribal population. So there, I think it has got a definite role in identifying the problem as well as giving this. So not in the clinic, I would say.
So what is the cutoff for the CTC, basically, in terms of age?
So less than 6 months, probably it's better to use a diluted one. But in India, the diluted cyclopentolate is not available. That is 0.5%. Sometimes it's available 1%. So I would say whoever comes maybe at 3 months or 4 months, probably it's a good idea to use Homide rather than cyclopentolate, because even that 1 drop for that tiny infant can be a problematic. After 6 months, I'm quite comfortable in using 1% for a child. And the cutoff range beyond that is any age you can use it beyond 6 months.
There's a question from Surat, Dr. Shobhan Babu, and he wants to know, Dr. Ramesh, whether atropine eye drops are used in an 18-year-old, and have you noticed any side effects in older patients?
Okay, there are 2 things I want to clarify here. Number 1, what is being published and what is being tried. Till now, all the patient, whoever has been published around the world, from Hong Kong, be it from Singapore, be it from India, it's between 5 or 12 years of age. Having said that, checking in an 18-year-old, probably I would not, because in 1 or 2 years, they are going to stabilize. And what about less than 5 years? Because that's also a question, because we have many patients with -4 at 3 years or so. What do? Do you start or no? We still don't have the evidence-based. Probably we are all, multiple studies are being done even in India. In another 6 months or 1 year, we will have answers. Like people are asking, less than 5 years, can we use it? more than 15, can we use it? ROP children with progressive myopia, can we use it? In cataract, to prevent myopic shift, can we use it? There are different scenarios. At this point of time, I don't have a evidence-based. Probably I can give some eminence-based answer for this, but we don't have it. Probably we'll have to wait for a scenario beyond this published category.
We have another question from Dr. Nitin Dedia from Mumbai. He's asking, what is the impact of atropine usage and retinal detachments?
Okay. Difficult question to answer because you will have to follow this atropine 1%, 0.1%. For example, if I have a 5-year-old child with -5 myopia now, after 10 years, if you say 10% of the -5 or -7 developed detachment, with atropine, how many developed? Without atropine, how many developed? There is a definite correlation between the amount of myopia and retinal detachment. The study says that we don't have a direct evidence to answer that question. What is the direct effect of atropine on detachment? Only thing what we know at this point of time is it can prevent the progression by 50%. If you can prevent 50%, I can't say there is a 50% reduction in the chance of retinal detachment or a developing of a chronic open-angle glaucoma or any kind of other complications of myopia or even IRMD. I can't really answer that. So we don't know. Simple answer is we don't know at this point of time.
Dr. Ramesh, we have Jitendra with us, and he's just made a comment saying that, when we discuss about children reluctant to wear glasses, so he's made a comment saying it's more than the children, it's always the parents who are reluctant to, give and accept the fact that their child has glasses. So he's just made a comment for that.
Agree with that.
And,
when I prescribe glasses, the face or the mother and father tells everything, and it really makes an impact on the child. 100% agree with that statement.
Yeah, and 2-3 doctors have asked this question in accommodative esotropia when we're giving the hypermetropic prescription. How do you wean off the glasses, and at what age will you start weaning the glasses?
Yeah. Again, there is no straight answer. If you ask 10 ophthalmologists, they will have 10 answers for this. Even on the evidence, there is not perfect answer. And this is the first question asked by parents. When you have an accommodative esotropia with the +5, with +5, child becomes orthotropic. And at that time, I make one statement. This is the refractive error which is not going to progress, which makes parents very happy. Unless they go to another ophthalmologist, they find 5.5, then they fight with that ophthalmologist. They never said that it will progress by 0.5. Whenever we do, amongst ourselves, there could be a difference of 0.5. So that makes them happy. But their next question is, doctor, when the child will have completely weaned off these glasses, where refractive surgeons will not come into picture, which is not going to happen. In my experience, we have seen more than a decade of these patients. If child starts with +4 or so, it's never going to come to 0, even after 18 or 20. When they reach 18 or 20, they still have +2, which I asked my refractive surgeon to take care of most of the time. But if they are 1.5 or 2, I have seen they are coming to maybe 0.5 and they are completely weaned off. There are other group who are +6 or +7. They have never come to a ophthalmologist. They have a esotropia. It gets completely corrected with +6, but they can't wear that +6 at 18 years. So lesser the refractive error, more chance that it will become almost 0, never 0. But my counseling is that it will reduce by 60 or 70% by around 16 or 17 years. Every visit, the parents will ask, now has it reduced? After 6 months, has it reduced? After 2 years, is it okay now? In spite of telling the same thing. So I have become more defensive here. You don't expect a reduction for 6 to 7 years. That's what I would tell them. So again, there is no straight answer, but we can expect reduction, but it's not so black and white in most of the situations.
There's a question on fogging in hypermetropia. Maybe Dr. Abha, do you want to throw some light on whether you fog your patients when prescribing hypermetropic glasses?
Yeah, when the patient is of school-going age, then you have to give the glasses depending on the fogging of the correction. Otherwise, for the patient of 3 years, 4 years age, there is no need of fogging, as far as I think. The school-going children, it is definitely you have to give the glasses.
Hema, I never prescribe in hypermetropia without fogging. Never. And as Abha said, if the child is 5 and above, you have to fog. You must fog. I think many of our youngsters have forgotten the art of fogging. They don't even know how to do it probably. I'm not sure. But we were taught it and we were supposed to do it. I would like Ramesh's comment on this.
Yeah, if they don't have esotropia, I think there is a definite role of fogging and doing the refraction as well as prescription. I think it's a good, very, very good technique which helps us in most of the situations.
My view is a little different. I don't do fogging. I basically, because I don't believe that children can give a good subjective response. So unless the child is about 7 or 8 years of age, I don't even do a PMT. I don't even attempt trying a refraction. But yet when I go to so many charitable hospitals, commonly the general ophthalmologist, even for a 3-year-old and 4-year-old, will write PMT, and then the optometrist will come running to me, ma'am, how do we do a PMT for a 3-year-old?
That's because general ophthalmologists don't know.
Hemalini, Dr. Hemalini Samant, I completely agree with you. There is no point in doing PMT or any one of this in a child who is 4 years or 3 years or 5 years. In older children, when they don't have esotropia, probably in some subset of patients you can do a fogging. Other place where you can do fogging is when you're doing refraction on nystagmus patients. So these are the only situations. I did not mean that in all hyperopics at all ages we do it, but it's only in selected patients. And they already would have developed some kind of amblyopia. No point in spending half an hour on fogging. I completely agree with that kind of situations.
Dr. Abha, do you give prescribed tinted glasses in your practice?
No.
And photochromatic glasses?
No.
What about Ramesh? Do you?
Not really, unless the child has cone dystrophy or some albinism or something like that. Otherwise, no. People generally ask, parents ask, is it a good idea to wear? I don't prescribe otherwise, no.
What about photochromatic?
Even photochromatic, no. I don't generally advise.
No. And there are some children, at least here in Bombay, they ask, 8 and 9-year-olds that should we make, if they're myopic, should we make goggles with myopic prescription? Is that necessary? How would you take that question?
I would. Like there are some parents ask for, can you attach it to the sports, the swimming goggles? If they can afford, why not? Let them go for it. They can have 2 pairs of glasses, but not for routine use, because sometimes when they play outside, either golf or something, they want to have this. So they can go for it, a subset of patients.
Correct. And, what is the tip that you would give all the parents these times? Because, with this COVID thing going around, everyone's attending online classes. Online school is going on for 8, 9 hours a day. And once the school gets over, the children have tons of homework. And after that, their free time, because they're not allowed to go outdoors, is indoors playing video games. So what tips would you give to the parents in this time?
I don't know, post-COVID era, it's going to be the most difficult question, because even for playing, there is social distancing. Whatever they can do properly is this kind of talks and online courses. So I don't know how to, even before COVID, this is the most toughest question I had to face, because most of the patients, they have homework, they have their blogs and other things on iPad. and at one time you say use less of gadgets. What I would do is I would do a combination. At least you can request the school people that let them play at least for some time, which is never a thing nowadays. You know,
Yeah.
I always tell the parents, we used to go out most of the times. We need to tell the kids to go out and play. So this is very important, but it's impossible to be on the perfect platform where we do not use gadgets at all, both for adults as well as for kids. It's not going to be possible.
You might agree with me, Ramesh. Being in an institute, I'm in a private practice as well as an institute practice, and I've seen a high rise of acute onset esotropias concomitant because of excessive use of mobile phones. What is your experience in that?
Yeah, we see at least 2 to 3 cases which need surgery every month, probably, presumably due to increased gadget use. So it's not a big number, but it's a major concern. Yes.
But how do you conclude, Ramesh?
I know. That's what I said.
Because of,
yeah,
you
that's
know,
why I said the underline, presumably due to this. Because if you don't find any other, we blame it on this. That's what it is. Like even earlier, kids used to play outside. They used to, some of the people used to be reading all the time. They had more chances of having glasses power. So it's not completely, there is a cause and effect relationship, but I think there is something playing there.
Yeah, because parents will ask you this question that, you know, how much screen time? Screen time is a word which is very common nowadays, being used by all parents and children also, because they want their screen time. So parents ask you, what is the ideal thing to give them? I don't think there's anything ideal. I mean, how do you define an ideal for this? What would be your take?
Yeah, ideal depends upon what is the type of school the child is going, what are the aspects for them. There is nothing ideal, but WHO has come up with some recommendation. Children less than 3 years, no cell phone at all. They should not be even seeing at all less than 3 years. Beyond 3 years, around 40 minutes, depending upon beyond 8 years, it can go up till 2 hours and things like that. So what is very sure, which can affect their vision as well as behavior, is less than 3 years, because first 1000 days in a child is extremely important.
Absolutely.
Till that time, no gadgets at all. That I think most of the parents can follow. Beyond that, it's not possible, and it's not practical for anybody to follow no gadgets beyond that. But
I doubt, Ramesh, I doubt. You're saying below 3 years. My 2.5-year-old dear grandson howls if the phone is taken away from him and we want to talk. My son and daughter-in-law, we want to talk. He howls like crazy. They have to give it back to him.
I know it's the discipline with which the child is being told.
Yeah.
If they have given, okay, the child wants to eat, during that time we have to give. There is nothing like we have to. It's a discipline. It's the easiest thing for a parent. 80% of the parents, it's the easiest thing to pacify the child. It's not anything else.
I know. It's, yeah, as you said, it's the easy way out.
Yeah.
You just hand them the phone and...
Okay, anything else?
Yeah, Ramesh has a question that in Down's syndrome, would you undercorrect the myopic refractive error because they have an accommodation lag in Down syndrome?
Yeah, probably depending upon the child. If they just have simple refractive error without any esotropia or anything, if it is a very mild one, I would just give glasses. But when you do a dynamic retinoscopy, if there is a severe lag or anything, sometimes you can even give bifocals, which makes their writing and reading skills much better. It's a subset of patients we can give either a bifocal or you can reduce. But reducing the minus power can compromise their distance vision. So I would probably give them a bifocal.
Okay.
It all depends upon the finding of dynamic retinoscopy.
one last question I think we'll take here, that there's a doctor from Bangalore who wants to know that, if you have patients with colobomas involving the macula, or if you have Leber's amaurosis and you have high refractive errors in them, and the vision is only hand movements or finger counting, would you prescribe glasses or would you just leave them alone?
Okay, this is something similar to patients with the cortical visual impairment. There are 90% of the visual losses because of the brain issue, right? But the eye focusing, the optical system has to be proper. I have a number of patients where the patients have LCA. We can say that LCA patients have very poor vision. We don't have to do anything. I would not agree with that. Whatever coloboma, it's not so easy to do a refraction, especially if the coloboma involves the macula. Otherwise, I would give a refractive error, which is a basic for, even if it can make a difference of 10% in that child, I would give. There is no question about it. And we all should prescribe in this kind of situations for sure.
Okay. Should we take one or two more questions, Sunena ma'am?
Yeah, sure. I think we can, because I've asked the
Ramesh,
to extend time a little. Is it okay with you, Ramesh?
Yeah, sure,
you have
sure.
any other commitment?
Shubhangi Dhave is with us. She's part of this webinar. She's joined in, and she wanted to know in high hyperopia above +6 with hyperopia, above +6 with exotropia, and ametropic amblyopia. Is there any role of undercorrection? Could you just, again, I think we've discussed it, but could you just give a guideline?
Yeah. Earlier, I used to undercorrect everybody, exotropia with hypermetropia. But I've changed my practice, because unless you give the visual system to develop, whatever is optimal, you have to give. I wouldn't give +6 because they may not accept it. But what I have seen is that if +6 with orthotropia and exotropia, they accept more hyperopia than an orthotropic patient. If it is esotropia, full correction, there is no question. +6 I'll give. If it is orthotropia, I would give +4 or so. In this situation, I would give around +5. There are some instances I've even given +5.5. So the guidelines in exotropia and hypermetropia are changing. We are going in favor of more and more near total correction, because their optical system and the vision has to improve for the control of the exotropia. And obviously, hypermetropia can increase the exotropia. That's there. But still, I would give near total or towards the total correction.
Okay. Ramesh, Siddharth is also with us, Siddharth Kesarwani, and he wants to know your approach for prescribing glasses patients with anti-metropia.
Okay.
So first, for the audience, explain what is anti-metropia.
Yeah, anti-metropia is one eye will have hypermetropia, other eye will have a myopia, or one eye will have hypermetropia, other eye can have just astigmatism. It's possible. So in these kind of situations, with regards to anti-myopia, whatever myopia in that particular eye, I will give full correction. But for the hypermetropic correction, I will follow the guideline of orthotropic hypermetropia, esotropic hypermetropia, and exotropic. So I would undercorrect. In general, for example, let's take a scenario of +2.5 in the right eye, with which the vision is 20/60, and the other eye is 20/100 with -8 myopia. Straightforward, -8 I'll give. But here, if the child is if I am able to do a fogging, I will give for +2.5, whatever is accepting. Otherwise, I'll give somewhere around +1.75. And here, even the myopic eye will become normal after 1 or 2 cycles of your visit. You don't have to start patching immediately. Over a period of time, generally the hypermetropic eye will not have 20/20 vision, or rather the child will not gain 20/20 vision. You might have to do some bit of patching of the other eye. That's the prescription. It becomes even more complex when there is an aniso astigmatism or one eye hypermetropia. Again, I will give a full cylinder in that eye. If there is a, this is the situation I would look into. And there are extreme situations we have, especially in pseudophakic, +10 in one eye because of the aphakia, and the other eye is -16 or so because of myopia. We can see this kind of situation where I will prefer a contact lens. But if contact lens is not possible, maybe I'm okay to do a very rarely a refractive surgery if the child is 8 years or 10 years in one of the eyes of myopia. This, especially in a child with development delay. It's not that I've done a lot, but some of the clear lens extraction and things like that I have done in extreme antimetropias. So it's a call we have to take with the discussion with the parents and things like. It's not easy, but these are the different principles for antimetropia.
At this point, I'd just like to acknowledge Dr. Siddharth's efforts, because he's published a paper in the IGO on behalf of the GPOS group in Mumbai, which clearly gives guidelines as to how to use the 0.01%, 130% atropine in children. So those of you who have any queries can refer to his article. It's a very concise and short, good article written by him. Any other questions? Dr. Abha, do you want to ask anything?
Abha, unmute yourself. Unmute yourself.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
You want to make a final closing comment or remark or something, because I think it's been about an hour and a half now.
Yeah. I think Madam had one case for asking.
Actually, Abha, there are so many questions coming in from the audience that I thought my case would wait. So if we can take one more question from the audience.
Personal experience, one or two tips from your personal experience before we close this session.
So I just say that whenever the patient comes for any other cause, just do a flash retinoscopy, Bruckner's test, to just rule out first any high hypermetropic or high myopic refractive errors. And when we give the glasses, we need a more counseling and talking to the parents. The first thing I tell them that you must believe that this patient needs glasses. When you believe, the child will automatically believe. And I also tell them that don't get scared of जो आजू बाजू के लोग बोलेंगे. सबसे पहले तो घर में जो सासू जी हैं, नानी जी हैं, वो पहले बोलती कि अरे इतने छोटे बच्चे को चश्मा कैसे लग गया. So you have to explain it to them, and I always ask them to bring the grandparents for the next visit, so that I can explain it to them. And it's a very important, and you need a frequent follow-up of these patients, because what happens sometimes, if the suppose we are giving high hypermetropic glasses and the child doesn't wear the glasses, then what happens, the parents, they don't come to show it. So I always explain it to them that even if the child doesn't wear the glasses, you bring the patient. We may not charge for the second time, but I will tell you how he will use the glasses. Means we can prescribe atropine or hometropine or any other cycloplegic. So the first thing is that it is very important to have a close follow-up of these patients. So that is what I want to say for giving the glasses in these patients.
Dr. Vardhaman, you want to say anything, contribute anything before we wind up? I mean, since you're a refractive surgeon, what age are you doing LASIK for our adolescents? Unmute yourself.
I think for refractive surgery, of course, it's very straightforward that at least the refractive error is stable and has to be more than 18 years of age. But of course, now we know that there is some recent relative evidence that probably the pediatric refractive surgery may play a role in very, 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 very selective patients. But I think this is a topic of big discussion actually, so may not be the right platform right now for us to do. But of course, I think what we see from here and the role of diluted atropine will play a big role, because a lot of studies have predicted that almost by 2050, we will have 50% of population which will become myopic. And if this thing is prevented by atropine, will be a big, let's say, benefit to the community at large. Probably something which is, let us say, will be a disadvantage for refractive surgeons like us. But I think for community at large, it will be a big effect, definitely. And I think it is almost 1.5 hours.
Yes. In closing, Vardhaman, I'd just like to say, I think this has been a wonderful discussion, much more successful than I anticipated, really. And as my last remark, I would like to say that please, everybody refract children, because don't leave them with their refractive errors. You'll be leaving that child with a disability for life, particularly if they are amblyopic. And I'm sure Ramesh and all other pediatric ophthalmologists would agree with me on this, that we don't want children to remain amblyopic. We want them to get better. So refraction is extremely important. Over to you, Vardhaman, now.
Thank you. Thank you very much, ma'am. So I think as the Honorary Secretary of Maharashtra Ophthalmic Society, it is my pleasure to thank everybody, especially as Dr. Sunaina Malik ma'am wanted the first webinar to be of pediatric ophthalmology, which is wonderfully so. And we are very glad to have none other than Dr. Ramesh Kikunia from LB Prasad Eye Institute, who made a very lucid, very comprehensive talk. I think people who attended today were really blessed with a lot of pearls. And we would like to really thank you from Maharashtra Ophthalmological Society for sparing your time in this era of COVID. Let's say that this is the pre and post-COVID era, which we will divide. And of course, at the same time, we would like to thank our own MOS members and moderators today who have taken the discussion further with their own pearls, Dr. Himalini Samant and Dr. Abba Kanade, for doing so wonderfully. I would like to also thank our president, Dr. Malik ma'am, and our very dynamic and very young Dr. Preetham Samant, our chairman scientific committee, who has taken this further. And we are very glad that this is a historic moment for MOS, because this is first ever webinar which was hosted by MOS. This happened mainly due to the COVID era, but thankfully so that we are able to connect to all our MOS members through our academic activities. Again, I'm very glad to share that 1,400 participants participated today. And we had more than 400 questions which were asked around India. And many people also participated from Philippines, from Cambodia, from Nigeria, and many other countries like that. We also have a YouTube recording of this webinar. I would like to tell this to all participants who couldn't join for the entire session. And this will be due in another couple of days for us. We would like to also ask all of you who attended for your feedback for us to make it better. As Dr. Malik madam has suggested, every 2 weeks at least, we will have one webinar where we will have one prominent national speaker and our own MOS speakers as moderators as well. And at the end, I would like to again thank everybody and most importantly, Entod for giving their due all-round support. Mr. Masurkar sir, Nikhil, Mr. Marke. I think Entod has done a wonderful job in coordinating this everything and making it so. We would like to see you soon for the next webinar, and we sign off from MOS. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone.
Very much.
Thank you, Ramesh.
Thank you.
Bye.
Kids first. Kids first.
Thank you so much.
Dr. Kekunia's the